Hello and welcome to the channel. In this video we'll learn all about the Excel ribbon and we'll see how to customize the ribbon manually and also modifying the XML code. I'm gonna show you all of that in this video. And the ribbon is this part up here with the different tabs: home, insert, page layout, and the different groups. Themes here is one of the groups with buttons. And as you see here, I have a new tab that I have created, and it is embedded in this file. It is actually coming with an add-in, so it appears in all the files in my system if I install the add-in. But before we see that, let's see how to customize the ribbon manually. And it is important to understand that if we change or we customize the ribbon manually, it will only apply locally to our local copy of Microsoft Excel. So if we send the file, the changes won't apply in other system. So to customize the ribbon manually, we have to right-click the ribbon and go to customize the ribbon. We can also go to File, Options, and customize the ribbon as you see here. And we can easily untick the tabs that we don't want to show in case we want to hide those tabs. We cannot modify existing groups or buttons, as you see here, is not allowed. And we can add a new tab. So depending what you've selected, the tab will come after. For example, let's add it after the developer tab. And by default, it has added a new group. We need a group to add the buttons to. So we can rename the tab. Let's call it macros. For example, we're gonna add some macros here. And then the group, let's also rename it and call it my macros. So we've created a new custom tab with a group, but we don't have anything in it. If I click OK, you see we have here our new tab, but there's nothing, it's empty. So we can add, again, going to customize ribbon, we can add buttons here to the new group, but for that we need some macros. So let me go back here and create some macros in the Visual Basic editor. And let's say the first macro, my macro 1, is just gonna display a message saying this is my macro 1, for example, just to make it simple. And let's have another one. And this is my macro 2. And now we can go back to the ribbon, customize the ribbon, and now in our group, which was here, macros, my macros, we can add the macros. So to do that, we go here to macros on the left side, and we can add those two macros that we've just created, right? One by one. So that's the first one, and then we can add the second one. And we can also rename the macros. I'm just gonna leave it as it is, my macro 1, and we can associate an icon there. Let me, just for demonstration purposes, let me put this smiley face for this one, and then let's put this sad face for the other one, right? So now if I go to my custom tab, we see the macro, and if we click it, of course, it runs the macro. This is macro 1, and this is macro 2. Okay, that's how we customize the ribbon manually. Now, the problem is, again, as I said earlier, if we send this file to someone, he won't see this, this customization, right? This only applies to our system. So if I open other Excel file, I still see this new group, new tab, and new group, right? But not in other systems. So to keep the changes, we actually need to modify the underlying XML code, and that's what I'm gonna show you in this video. But before we get there, let's see what we can do with VBA. When it comes to the ribbon, we cannot do exactly this with Visual Basic. Let me show you what we can and cannot do with Visual Basic. I'm adding a new module, and I'm gonna say manipulate ribbon, for example. So manipulate ribbon with Excel VBA. One of the things we can do is to show or hide the ribbon. And we do that with command bars. And command bars is a property of the application object, and it returns a command bar, and we've seen that in a previous video. And now we can use execute MSO, specifically saying hide ribbon. And if we run this, as you see, we have the ribbon is hidden. And if we run it again, it's back. The other thing we can do is to minimize the ribbon. The same code, just changing minimize ribbon, and in this case it's gonna collapse, as you see, the tabs. If we run it again, it's gonna actually maximize the ribbon now. So you see it shows the tabs there. That's one of the things we can do. Now there's actually a way to target the command bars object to add some buttons to the ribbon, but it is an old method and it only adds the buttons to a particular tab, which is the add-ins tab. So if I click customize, you see here we have a tab which is by default is hidden, and it's called the add-ins tab. So this older method adds buttons directly to the add-ins bar. So it's not very helpful if we want to actually customize and have our own tab. So I'm not gonna cover that. If you're interested to know how to do that, please go to the blog article, and as you see here, Excel ribbon customization, everything is explained here. And if you go a bit down, you'll see here the code to add a button to the ribbon programmatically, which is only adding the button to the add-ins tab. And it actually targets the command bar object, and it adds a command bar button. And we've already seen how to do that in a previous video. I'm leaving the link up here in the description. In the previous video, we added a button to the cell menu bar, while here we are actually targeting the worksheet menu or the ribbon, which is number 1. The rest is exactly the same as what we've seen in the previous video. So check the blog article if you want to know how to do that. Now, with all that being said, keep in mind that this is adding the buttons only to your local copy of Microsoft Excel and specifically to the add-ins tab, as I said before, right? Also, it is important to keep temporary true, so it's gonna be only temporary. It means it will disappear when you open Excel the next time. Now let's see how to modify the XML code to customize the ribbon and keep the changes within a file. So it's gonna be within this particular workbook, book 1. So first of all, I'm actually gonna remove the manual customization that we just added. And for that, you can untick this, or you can actually delete it completely. I'm also going to remove the add-ins so that we don't see that tab there, okay? And I'm gonna save this file to a folder, and yeah, it's gonna be macro enabled. So it can be like book 1, that's okay. So let's save it as book 1. And now we can change the XML code manually or using a tool from Microsoft. I'm gonna show you both ways. So let's start with the manual method. So first of all, we need to close the file. And then in the File Explorer, here's our file. This is a previous example, but this is the file we've been working with. It's an empty workbook actually. So first we're gonna change the extension to unzip the file, so to speak. And I'm gonna change it to zip. This is one of the ways to do it. It's gonna ask you if you're sure you want to change it. Yes, I'm gonna change it. And as you see, it has already recognized this as a zip file. Now, if we double click here, we see the underlying structure of the Excel file. And first of all, we need to add a folder with the exact name, custom UI, as I'm gonna write it down. So for that, we right click here and go to create a new folder. And we're gonna call it custom, lowercase, UI, uppercase. Okay, as you see, we've added this folder here. Now, inside this folder, we're gonna add the XML code with the ribbon customization. So let me go back here to files, And as you see, I have some files already prepared in the XML files folder. And this is the file that we need to add there. I'm gonna open it and try to explain you what we see here. Now, you can get this code from my blog post. Go down here to customize the ribbon with XML, and here are the steps. Point number 3. You can copy this code, and let me explain you what this code is telling you. It's very similar to HTML if you're familiar with that. As you see, we have the tabs tag, and inside the tabs we are adding one tab, and we are giving an ID, and the ID needs to be unique. So custom tab is my ID for this tab, and then we're giving a label. So I'm calling this a new tab. Before we use like macros, or you can use any other. Now inside this tab we are adding a group. And this is exactly the same we did earlier when we added manually. We need to have a group inside the tab to add the buttons to. So again, the group needs to have a unique ID. In this case, I'm calling this custom group 1. And then a label, and I'm calling new group. And now we can add a button or as many buttons as we want inside that group. And then we close the group, and of course we could add more groups and we could add more tabs as well. But in this example we only have one tab with one group and 3 buttons. And as you see, for each button we have a unique ID, and again it must be unique. It's button 1, button 2, button 3. Then we have the label. So the first one is going to say a large BTN, a large button. And down here we have the size, and it's large. And then there is a super tip in this button. A super tip is some text we see when we hover over the button. And finally we have an on action. On action is going to call my macro. So actually all the buttons are going to call the same, but we could change it. We could say the large button is going to call my macro 1, while the other 2 buttons are going to call macro 2 and my macro 3, right? And as you see, these other buttons are normal because the size is normal. You're going to see the difference in a moment. So now let me save this with these changes. We will get to that in a moment. We need to have 3 macros, my macro 1, my macro 2, and my macro 3 in this file. But now that you've seen that, this is our XML file. I'm going to close it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this right here in this folder. And it needs to have that exact name, custom UI 14.xml. So, okay, if I go back, you see we have our file here. There's one more thing we need to do. In the folder underscore rels, we need to modify the XML code in this file. And what you're gonna see in this file is something similar to what I have here. And we need to add our relationship, which is this one on the top. And what you see here, you see is everything in one line. It's difficult to see, but there are several relationships. If you separate each of the relationships, you would see something like what I have in this other file, except the first relationship. That's the one we need to add with custom UI 14. So I'm gonna copy all of this, which is just the same as what we had there, plus the new relationship on the top. And again, if you feel confused about all of that, have a look at the blog post, and you see here this is going to be your file, and the one in bold is the new one you need to add. So I come here, double click, and I'm just replacing all of that with my file, and I save it. Okay, now I can close it. And And this is a bit complicated, I know, and that's why there's another way to do that I'm gonna show you in a moment. But now that we've done everything, let me close here, go back to our folder, and now we can rename or change the extension back to XLSM. Yes, I want to change it. Now if we open book 1, we see that we've got a new tab here with 3 buttons. The first button is large and the 2 other buttons are normal. And you see the first button was associated with an icon while the other 2 are not. And let me go back here and show you how to add the icon. So here in this file with the XML code, there was a parameter I didn't mention earlier, which is called image MSO. And image MSO refers to the icon or the graphical icon that we can add to the button. In this case, is a page orientation portrait. And we can get all of those. If you go back to my post, you see here there's a link in several places in the blog article. There is a link to the Microsoft Office image MSO icons, which is this page here. And here you see all the icons available in Microsoft Office, and then you can add the icon using image MSO with the name in that list. This is a bit complicated. There's another way to do it, and I'm gonna show you, which is using a tool that you can download also from my blog. The tool looks like this. I'm gonna show you in a moment. And for that, let me create a new file, and I'm gonna save it to the same folder as book 2. Okay, and this is an empty new workbook, and now I'm gonna close it and we're gonna open it with the custom UI editor. So this is the custom UI editor. It's very simple. It's a Microsoft tool, is a tool for Microsoft Office. Very simple. You just need to open the file here. So we're gonna open again the book 2 in this case, and then you go to insert, and you can insert here a custom UI part. You should choose 2010, and that's actually adding the custom UI 14 file that we've added manually earlier, right? And now that file is empty, you can insert a sample XML code. Here you have several options. For example, the most common is to add a new tab, a new custom tab. So if you click here, you're gonna get the code that we've seen earlier. Ribbon, the tabs, and then one tab, and it's actually by default adding a group and adding one button. But you can actually copy this and add as many buttons as you know, and as I explained earlier, each button needs to have a unique ID, so you need to change this and have a unique ID, and then you can change the label custom button 2, custom button 3. You can also change the image MSO. As you see here, there's a happy face for all of them. I'm gonna leave that for now. And finally, you need to change the on action. This is the macro that you want to call. Before we had like my macro 1 and my macro 2 and the different macros that you want to call with each button, right? So this would be 2 and this could be 3. So anyway, that's exactly the same that we've done earlier manually. Now you save it, and you can open the file That was book 2, and as you see now, in book 2 we have a custom tab with the different buttons there, and all of the buttons are big here, while in the other example we had one big button and two normal buttons. Now if I click here, it's not gonna run any macro because we don't have that macro in place. So let me show you how to add the macros. It's a slightly different than the macros we have for the manual customization. So let me close this one and let's go back to this one here. So let's go to the Visual Basic Editor, and I'm going to insert a new module for that. And one of the macros that was macro 1, now we need to add here control as I ribbon control. So we need to add this to allow the XML code to recognize our macro within the file. Now we can here add whatever we want, and again for simplicity I'm showing a message box. This is my macro 1, and we could do the same for the other two. My macro 2 and my macro 3, there were 3 buttons with 3 linked to 3 macros, but we need to remove the previous macros that we used in the example before because they have the same name, so there's a conflict because they are all public macros. So let me just remove that, or actually remove the whole module. So that's what we have now. Now if we save that and go back to our tab, click the buttons, as you see we are running each of the macros. This is macro 1, second button is macro 2, and so on. So the process may be overwhelming the first time, but you can just watch the video again, or you can go to my blog post where everything is explained, and you can download also a file, an example file with the customization that we've used in this video. You can also download the Compare XLS add-in, which is adding this custom tab to Excel when installed with different groups. As you see, workbooks is one of the groups, worksheets is another group. In this group we have different buttons. You see these 2 are large buttons and these other 3 are normal buttons. So this was a bit of a longer video, but I hope it covered all what you need to know about Excel ribbon customization. Thanks for watching.